Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I'm the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment. And a lot of people are using that virtually these days. You can complete assessments and bring people together for workshops and conversations all online. And you can find out more about that at harmonyinsights.com. I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of HR pros solving real HR problems across the country in 10 different licensed chapters. And we have over 2,500 members, I believe, at this point. All free, all online, meaningful conversation when I think we need it most. So you can find out more about the HR Hot Seat community at hrhotseat.com. You've joined us today for a Harmony Insights lunch date. And as I've been describing it a few weeks ago, when I realized that I was going to need to be inspired, given how much time I was spending at home by myself in my office working on various things, I decided I was going to bring colleagues in for a half an hour of my lunch hour, 12 to 12:30 Central Time here in Chicago, to talk about inspiring, actionable things. And it's been just a lot of fun so far. And today's guest, Tracie Sponenberg, has joined us to talk about something that we've titled Discovering Your Voice. Tracie, welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to see some familiar faces.
You and I have crossed paths in a number of interesting ways. And I would love, right off the bat, to get your take on what's going on these days. We are all impacted in some way by coronavirus, and I would love to hear, if you were willing to share, some way in which, even prior to you introducing yourself, some way in which you have been impacted by what's going on these days.
I mean, I think there are many ways, and I know everybody says, well, I'm busier, and I'm certainly, yeah, that's the case. I'm at home. This would be amazing if this was my work office, but if I've always wanted a couch in my work office, but this is my home office. So I've been home. So that's been different. But I think that the thing for me, the biggest impact was, the crushing weight of the world changing. And I didn't expect that. And we haven't seen that a lot, at least I haven't a lot in my life. The 9/11 was the closest thing. I didn't expect how, especially early on, but how deeply I'd be personally impacted and how sad and isolated I'd feel. And I have 3 kids. And so it's important to, share with them that we're going through struggles, but also to, maintain some sense of normalcy. So I wasn't prepared for how difficult that would be. And I think as the weeks went on and on and on, we figured it out. And, my mom is extremely ill and in Florida, and I can't see her. So it's been a pretty shitty few months, really, to me. Yeah. I mean, I think in all ways, for lots of ways, and we'll talk more about that. But it's nice. The sun's shining, the weather's better, so that is a real nice positive.
Yeah, you start to notice different things, don't you? You're looking for every opportunity to be grateful for something, I think.
Yes.
And you didn't say, oh, it's been kind of an inconvenience, or I'm a little down about it. You use the words crushing weight.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was an exaggeration. I'm talking to a lot of people who would agree with you to say, yes, this feels like a crushing weight that I just can't seem to lift off my shoulders.
Yep. It sucks. It is the world. I didn't want to be the mask police, but I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you are in human resources. A number of our audience members are, not everybody, but HR folks right now, it's, essential or not, I think there are different terms bouncing around for various levels of workers. I would argue that what HR professionals are doing in general is essential in a number of ways. On a different level, certainly, than healthcare workers.
Sure.
And we're grateful for them. But I also want to mention that I think part of our conversation today will be about the work that we are doing as HR professionals and how we are bearing the crushing weight of what's going on right now in that line of work. I came to you and I said, Tracie, I would love to invite you to be a guest on a Harmony Insights lunch date. And you said, great, I want to talk about discovering your voice, finding your voice. I know this is something that you were talking about often recently. I saw a recent interview that you did online on this topic, and I know you are planning to speak on it in other places. Tell people just briefly about who you are, where you come from, what positions you well to talk with us today about finding your voice.
Sure. So I'm sure some people are going, I know a number of you, but some people are like, who the hell is this lady and why is she here? But so I am the chief people officer of the Granite Group, and we're a essential business. I hate that term because everybody's essential, but that essentially
Right.
means we've been working throughout this whole pandemic, and
When I
we've
said it
been
earlier,
working.
every time I say essential, and I've said it a couple times in these interviews, the minute it comes out of my mouth, I automatically feel a little bit awkward about it
Yeah,
because I don't want to
yeah,
downplay those who have been deemed essential with a capital
right.
E, but I also want to make the point, as you are, that so many people are doing essential work. So
Yeah. Yeah.
be
And
that
we're
as
not
it
in the
may.
same category as doctors and nurses and
Right.
EMTs and grocery workers. And, but we have been working throughout. So we're a wholesaler of plumbing, heating, cooling, water, and propane supplies. So I've been working, and another term I hate, in HR. I consider myself a business professional who specializes in people, but I've been in human resources my whole career and in various size companies and various industries. And for the last 20 years in a position where I was reporting to the CEO. So I found that really, that balance of strategy and having my hands in the day to day has worked well. So I kind of found my home in medium sized companies. But what we'll get into more is on the side. I do some speaking. I do some co-organizing of different groups and Disrupt and HR Rebooted. And I didn't do that early in my career. I was very much a paper pushing, sign this form here. Apologies to any Karens, but Karen from HR, very much a traditional old school, personnel person.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so intrigued, and we could have an entire conversation on this alone. But you pushed back on the in HR terminology, and I love what you said.
Mm,
You said you if I remember correctly, you see yourself as a business professional specializing
mm-hmm.
in people.
Right.
I immediately want to go off on a tangent having to do with what it is about the
Go ahead.
HR term, because I think your voice is caught up in this. This is all part of who you are, your
Mm-hmm.
background, what you're doing now, and how you articulate your value to the world. Actually, that's a teaser. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. I want to put up a quick poll. I put together a poll, and I would love for people to respond to it if you can see it, saying, how confident do you feel in the value that you bring to the world and your ability to articulate that value? I didn't use the word voice, but you can imagine that it's in there. So if you can see that, it's either very confident, somewhat confident, or my new favorite poll response, it's complicated. So as people respond to that, why was your initial reaction to push back against saying that you are in HR, Tracie? I'm so curious about this.
Yeah, I think there's a connotation that HR folks who are working in HR are doing HR. But it's so much more. HR is so much more than the days of personnel and the days of payroll. And we're um, the often the right hand to the CEO. We're the keepers of the secrets. We're the emotional center of our organization. We have to understand deeply the business and the strategy of the company. It's so much more than that. So, and my role, and I think I definitely didn't always describe myself as this way, but my role is as a CPO is definitely business focused, but with an emphasis on people. So I don't think it's wrong for people to describe themselves as in HR, but HR is so much more.
Yeah, I love that. Fantastic point. So we'll save that conversation for another day, or maybe it's wrapped up into today's conversation. So right off the bat, we talked about that this is about finding and articulating our voice, and people have chimed in here. I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. People are saying 33% of our audience is saying that they feel very confident in the value they bring and how to articulate it, which are probably two very distinct pieces of the puzzle. 58% say somewhat confident. I would kind of throw myself into that bucket, although I'm hoping that I'm moving in some direction toward the very confident side of things. And then also it's complicated, which it certainly is. And so let's talk about that complicated piece today. Tracie, what are some of the challenges that you think our attendees are facing today, that you have faced yourself in terms of finding your voice and be able to articulate that to others with any sense of confidence.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what some of the challenges are and talk about that. But I can, speak for myself personally. I think I suffered from a terrible lack of confidence, a terrible lack of confidence for a very, very long time, very long time. I was really, I mean, I'm 47. So up until my 40s, into my 40s. And I was always one of those people who was, why does she get to do this? Or why does he get to do that? Or why not me? Why not me? Why not me? I was looking externally and trying to figure out why I wasn't getting picked for this job, or why I wasn't getting that opportunity, or why I wasn't doing that. And that was a portion of my career. And I spent part of that sad and part of that angry. And then I had a confluence of things that helped change things for me and change my outlook. And then when I started to go, well, why not me? Why not me? I have a lot to offer. And I got outside my comfort zone and started, I talk about this a lot, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that really changed things for me. And I think my biggest mistake, and I see this with a lot of friends, and I see this with others certainly, was looking externally for the change to happen. And when certainly some of that is valid, and some of that is people are stuck in terrible situations. But when I looked internally, that's when things really, really changed for me.
I love that. It's very insightful, and I immediately think of the extent to which we almost can't help but compare ourselves to other people. Especially those of us who are intentional about surrounding ourselves by people who are just movers and shakers that are making things happen.
Right.
And I don't know why this comes to mind. I immediately think of going to a conference and being among the masses in the audience with one person on stage in front of me. And I'm thinking, gosh, I would really love to do that. Or maybe I do it, but that person seems to do it so much better. And they seem so polished. And, I'm just beginning. And how could I ever, measure up to this thing that I'm seeing in front of me? So we almost can't help but compare ourselves, right?
Yeah, but you could take that and go, and which is exactly what I did, although speaking was never of interest to me, and we'll probably stumble on that later. But that's always what I did. But then now I look and go, okay, I want to see this person speak, and how are they engaged in the audience, and what can I take away, and what can I do better, and how can I improve myself, instead of, oh, I really wish I could do that. Well, you can, this.
Yeah.
I'm a realist, so I'm not a pie in the sky kind of person. Not everyone can do everything, but you can try.
I love, one of the things that I've said even multiple times already on these lunch dates is you never want to compare your beginning to somebody else's middle.
Right.
But it's so easy. I know, speaking from experience, at one point I wanted to launch a podcast. And so I was listening to so many podcasts thinking, oh my gosh, they have this all figured out, and speaking or even doing whatever work we do as HR professionals. Right. Holy cow, that person seems to have it all together. And they've been working for 20 years. Of course they appear that way.
No,
if
we're
you
all
talk to them, do they?
No, where everybody's a mess. Everybody's a gigantic mess in their own way. And that's comforting, I think. Nobody's perfect, really, especially the people that appear perfect online.
When you start comparing yourself to other people, and the fear and the self-doubt creep in, which it sounds like, you've experienced yourself, you hear people talk about this imposter syndrome. Is that something that you have struggled with along the way?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I remember this really clearly starting my first, HR manager job years ago. And I remember, and I was 26, 27, I was very young, thinking, why did they hire me? I can't do this. I can't do this. And, that followed me for quite some time, and really feeling like they hired the wrong person. And I think it wasn't until I got older. I mean, some of confidence comes with age. It wasn't until I got older and more comfortable within myself. I think back then I would have rather have been just about anyone else other than me. I think now I would never want to be anyone else. So a lot of that kind of comes together, but I've definitely been there. And I still have moments, and like I see somebody, occasionally I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be great? I'm like, well, I could try, I might not do, I could try. There's nothing stopping me. Right.
Yeah. When I think back to, I've put up a few posts that have stood out in all the social media posts that I put out there that stood out as posts that really resonated with people. And one of them was on this very topic. And
Mhm.
for some reason, Matthew McConaughey was the cover of the article that I was posting, but it had to do
That
with,
helps.
right? It had to do with fake it till you make it. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, what an interesting thing to kind of talk about and post about. And so I did. And that got more attention than almost anything else that I've ever posted. And it made me
Yeah.
think about the extent to which we all, at some point or another, um, struggle with the imposter syndrome, whether or not we call it
Yeah.
that. And it's really, sort of to define it, it's I'm doing something that I don't know that I should be doing, that I deserve to be doing, that I'm capable
Right.
of doing. Who am I to, when I started Harmony Insights, who am I to put coach, career coach or
Right.
business owner or entrepreneur on
Right.
a business card? Those aren't, I'm not those things. I've been an HR practitioner.
Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges that I think, at least that I've experienced personally, and it sounds like you have as well, when it comes to finding our voice is,
Sure.
uh, there's so much noise, there's so much clutter. So finding your voice seems like an almost impossible task when there are so many other people to compare yourself to and so many doubts and fears bouncing around in your own head.
Yeah. And when you don't know who you are or who you want to be, and it's hard to find your voice when you don't really know what that looks like. Uh,
And I think we could have had this conversation at any point in the recent past and talked about the same noise and the same clutter. Do you have any perspective on challenges that might be specific to what we are going through now with coronavirus and people working from home and just trying to hold on to their jobs in a
yeah.
lot of cases? How does that all contribute to this ability to find and articulate, this genuine, authentic voice that we bring to conversations?
Yeah, I think it's challenging now, certainly, because there's so much uncertainty in the world, and so when you're dealing with that, it's even more difficult to find who you are and figure out who you want to be. But I think the thing that's helped me through all of this, and I know Jenny's here, and we just chatted yesterday, so that was wonderful, and those kind of things, those connections, those. It's hard to see somebody flat on a screen instead of in person, but that's what I've held on to through all of this. And I have a group that we get together virtually once a week and bounce things off, all about coronavirus all the time, but bounce ideas off each other because we're all stumbling through. Nobody knows what the hell we're doing. We're trying to figure it out, but we have each other and we don't use each other often enough. I think it's wonderful that everybody's here and connecting, and I'm joining Friday and looking forward to that. But we don't use our connections often enough. I think back on all of the times that I've reached out to people like, hey, I love what you're doing in here. That's how I met Enrique. I love what you're doing. I'd love to be a part of it. I think of all the times I've done that. I've never had anyone say no. And if somebody's reached out to me, I've never said no to used to be in-person coffee or virtual coffee or what have you. Because we're all in this together, and that's never more true than right now. And so those connections, whether you know someone or not, are so critical.
Some people may know that I, in part, come up with the guests for these lunch dates based on the question I've been asking people: what is your greatest need right now? And their responses to that question guide me in terms of who I go to as Harmony Insights lunch dates and the topics that I anticipate they're going to bring. And so many people are talking about meaningful connection, needing meaningful connection. I do a lot of work with personality styles. And so I think it's really easy to generalize and say there are certain personality types that crave connection and others that don't, which I think is a
Yeah,
mischaracterization. I don't think
right.
that's the case. I'm going somewhere with this. You mentioned just moments ago about Enrique, and you're talking about Enrique Rubio, who's the founder of the Hacking HR community. I wanted to let people know that you and I are both going to be featured in a workshop series, coffee series that he's running now called a You Can Do It coffee series. And this Friday morning, he's going to be asking us questions around this concept of how to network for introverts. And I set up a quick URL so you can find that. If you go to harmonyinsights.com/coffee, it will redirect you to the Hacking HR link, and you might have to poke around a little bit to find our specific conversation for Friday morning. But Tracie, I want to ask, and I don't know that the word has come up yet, to what extent has identifying as an introvert, which you do, or someone who tends to be on the introverted side of things, to what extent has that been a challenge for you in finding your voice?
I think it was always a terrible challenge early on until I turned it around and used it as an opportunity. And so I talk about this a lot, and I know you are a disc nerd, and I'm more of a PI nerd, but similar tools. About 5 years ago, I took my first PI assessment. I had taken the disc before, and I knew I was an introvert, and I'm somewhat of a strong introvert.
And by PI, you're talking about the predictive index.
Predictive index, right. So it's a behavioral assessment. So I took that, went through training for it. And for the first time, I think really deeply understood myself, which sounds really weird that I could take an assessment and have that reaction, but I did. And so I ended up chatting with somebody who knew a lot about that and who knew what that meant. And they were describing what came from the read back. And I went, wow, that is so accurate. And I knew I hated parties. I knew I was an introvert. I knew I didn't like crowds. I knew, I can handle things for small doses. I didn't really know why. And I didn't know, I just assumed I could never speak in public. I could never get up in front of groups. I could never do that. I assumed that, and I assumed wrong. So once I understood myself, I could kind of turn that around and go, okay, yeah, I'm an introvert, but that doesn't mean that I can't do these things. It just may mean that when I'm at a conference, I stay on site, or, I don't stick around at parties for 3 hours. I maybe go in and hang out for a little bit and then go back to my room, where I spend a quiet night here and there reading, and I have to recharge in a different way. And I love people and I love being around people, just not tons of people all the time. So it was really hampered my career, I thought, early on, but it really enhanced it as I went forward. Introverts tend to be reflective and tend to think before they speak, and so I had to work on taking more risks and do actually kind of push against that a little bit. But I speak up a lot more now, but I tend to be very thoughtful about what I do put forward into the world.
Jenny chimes in here saying she loves predictive index. She's a maverick, which I'm assuming is one of the terms.
I'm not surprised. Yes. Jenny is a maverick. Yeah, I'm a specialist.
We'd love to hear in the chat section if you have experience with other assessments and the extent to which maybe they've helped you gain insight into your own personality style and your own voice, and sharing that with others. Tracie, you may know this, that Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet and then did a TED Talk, a very popular TED Talk on the topic of introversion, has said recently on an Adam Grant podcast, I think it's called Work Life or something like that. I was listening to it, and she said, there's one of the greatest mischaracterizations of introverts is that they don't get energy from connecting with other people, that only extroverts do. And introverts have to spend time by themselves, and you picture them like in a closet somewhere, cut off from all society. And she said, I don't think enough attention is paid to what amount of connection, what type of connection, and with whom. She said, I'll be the first to say as an introvert that I crave that connection, but it's just going to look and feel a little bit different maybe than some of my extroverted friends.
Right.
And to your point in the story that you've told, it sounds like when you come to see however you identify as being less of a challenge or a barrier and more of maybe like a secret weapon, like something that positions you uniquely among maybe other candidates for a job or other people who do the work that you do, that's the point at which you really start to grow as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, we're all unique, and we all have of different things, some wonderful and some not so wonderful. And that all makes us who we are. And so I think when we look at what we can't do instead of focusing on the things we can do, we do ourselves a real disservice.
Yeah. We have some other people chiming in here. Sean, or Allie, says a fellow disc nerd. Sean says about disc, has him at a hard C, dead center on the outermost border. There's the circle that disc uses, and your dot is somewhere on that circle. And sometimes people have such a strong preference for one or another style, it looks like their dot is trying to escape the circle altogether. And I know that describes me as well. So in the time that we have left, Tracie, I want to promise people actionable takeaways.
Mhm.
And so what are one or two tips that you can share with our attendees today who are eager to find their voice, to make their way through the clutter and the noise, and really get a sense of what drives them, what they value, and how to articulate that to others?
So, and you mentioned some speaking that I've been doing on this topic, and I've been fortunate to do that. So right now there's something called the HR Voice Summit going on, and I spoke at it, but there are many, many other speakers all geared toward finding your voice, which I think is super cool. There's 20 speakers from around the world. And I'm sure you'll, well, talk about my connection information, how to find me, I'm happy to send that. But if you put in the HR Voice Summit, you'll find that. I plan on catching all of those. I think that will be, or as many as I can. That will be super, super interesting. You mentioned Susan Cain. She's certainly wonderful. Also, Amy Cuddy is a researcher, and technically some of her theories have been debunked, but she talks about the Superman, Superwoman pose, which I found actually, my company is 85% male. So when I was actually in the office a lot and in meetings, I would stand up if somebody would come in and do that. I found that really helpful. But she talks about, she's got a couple of books at least, I think, but she talks about not faking it till you make it, but faking it until you become it. So just finding your confidence and finding your voice and just kind of plugging away at that until you get there. I also think that we didn't really talk about this. There's a lot of interesting stuff to be found around feedback. And there's a guy on LinkedIn called Chris Colaco. And he's the 1 minute feedback manager, I think it talks about. But in order to know who you are, you have to also know how you're perceived. So getting feedback and having trusted people who can talk to you about that and not being afraid to ask for that information is really, really super helpful. So I love following his stuff. I think that's really interesting. And then we can go on and on. Disrupt HR has some great talks on this, and certainly there are TED Talks, but hopefully that's helpful.
Very helpful. And I'm going to follow up with everybody who registered for today's lunch date via email. And I'm going to include links to a number of the resources that you just shared. I'll get those from you. We'll get those out to people so that they can look into some of these books and organizations and other resources that you've just mentioned. Tracie Sponenberg, this has been just a fantastic conversation. It always goes by so quickly. And I know people are going to want to follow up with you to learn more about where you're speaking and more about the Granite Group and your experience as an HR professional or a business professional specializing in people, as you put it. Where can they find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at Tracie Spon, TraciESPON. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just put in my name and you'll find me. I'd love to connect with you. You can email me. It's my first initial last name, tsponenberg@thegranitgroup.com. And I have a website that's my first initial last name. That's just like stuff that I've done. So if you want to find that HR Voice, you can find that there too.
And I'm convinced that just by registering and showing up to any conference these days, they're likely to see you on stage. You were speaking all over the place.
It was going to be a really fun year that I was really busting outside my comfort zone, but it's still been, it is what it is. Nobody's speaking anywhere these days.
Yeah, I know. I feel that too. Well, thank you, Tracie. If people, and add your comments and thanks in the chat area. But if you found value in this conversation and would like to be part of future Harmony Insights lunch dates, we have a couple great conversations coming up tomorrow with my friend Claire. We're going to talk about the how and why of LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm pretty comfortable with LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm still figuring out. I'm late to the game. So
Claire's awesome. I can't make that one, but I'm going to hopefully catch it when it's recording.
And then Friday, we have John Thurmond, who is one of the co-hosts of the HR Social Hour half-hour podcast. He's going to join us to talk about finding new ways to nurture your audience and your community and your network, especially in challenging times. And John is just a fantastic person, so I'm excited to have him. Going into next week, some additional conversations that I'm excited about. And I just recently added the second ever pop-up panel. Last Friday, we had the first ever pop-up panel where in the moment, I identified panelists among volunteers, and then they spoke for a bit on the topic of meaningful connection. And the next one coming up in a couple of Fridays is going to be about the topic of leadership. So if you want to show up just to be an audience, you can. If you want to show up with the chance of being chosen on the spot as a panelist, you can do that as well. And I'm really excited about that concept, and it seemed to be pretty well received. So I hope you join me for our next pop-up panel. All of that detail can be found at harmonyinsights.com/lunchdates. Tracie, again, this has been fantastic. If people would like to join us or stick around, you can certainly do that. If you need to go about your business this afternoon, please do. Hopefully you do so even more inspired than you would have been otherwise by having joined us. But if you'd like to stick around, you're welcome to do that as well. Tracie, thank you so much for spending this time.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you.